The Holy Gospel according to St. Mark, the 7th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
From there he set out and went away to the region of Tyre. Jesus entered a house and did not want anyone to know he was there. Yet he could not escape notice. But a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit immediately heard about him, and she came and bowed down at his feet. Now the woman was a Gentile, a Syrophoenician origin. She begged him to cast the demon out of her daughter. He said to her, "Let the children be fed first, for it is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." But she answered him, "Sir, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." Then he said to her, "For saying that, you may go. The demon has left your daughter." So she went home, found the child lying on the bed, and the demon gone. Then Jesus returned from the region of Tyre and went by way of Sidon towards the Sea of Galilee in the region of Decapolis. They brought him a deaf man who had an impediment in his speech and begged him to lay his hand on him. He took him aside in private, away from the crowd, and put his fingers into his ears, and he spat and touched his tongue. Then, looking up to heaven, he sighed and said to him, "Ephphatha," that is, "be opened." And immediately his ears were opened, his tongue was released, and he spoke plainly. Then Jesus ordered him to tell no one, but the more he ordered them, the more zealous they proclaimed it. They were astounded beyond measure, saying, "He has done everything well. He even makes the deaf to hear and the mute to speak." This is the gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. Hallelujah. 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 Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. Hallelujah.
Grace and peace be with our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. As a physician, I had days when I felt every patient was demanding of my time and energy. They all wanted to be fixed, and sometimes I was at a loss as to what to do. I just wanted to get away to rest, to regroup, and refocus. I wonder if this is how Jesus felt when he entered a house in Tyre, trying to avoid recognition. Jesus was recognized, however, despite his efforts. Perhaps his human side was feeling fatigued, and he too needed a respite. Why was Jesus in Tyre, far from his home in Galilee, in a town despised by the Jews? Was he just trying to get away? Or did he know he had a different mission to complete? Jesus was approached by a Syrophoenician woman with a daughter with a demonic possession. The woman's description is very significant for all the barriers she represented. First of all, there is the issue of her race. She was a Gentile, a Syrophoenician. Another strike against her was her gender. She was also unaccompanied by a male relative. She requested the healing of a daughter, not a son. Despite all these barriers, she approached Jesus directly with her request, kneeling at his feet in a subservient position. Shockingly, Jesus replied, "Let the children be fed first, for it is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." In Jesus' metaphor, the children are the children of Israel, and the dogs are the Gentiles. Why did Jesus answer this way? To modern ears, this statement sounds rude. Scholars have debated on the possible reasons for Jesus' remark. One theory is that Jesus is testing the woman and her faith. His statement is purposeful in trying to see how she responds, and she passes the test. Another theory is that Jesus is tired and shows his human side, saying the first thing that comes to his mind. He is speaking as a Jewish man to a Gentile woman. The third possible explanation for Jesus' response is that he does not yet realize the scope of his new mission to the Gentiles. The woman responds, "Sir, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." By saying this, she means that every child deserves the love of Jesus, regardless of whether that child is Jew or Gentile. Jesus, in his divine wisdom, acknowledges the correctness of the woman's response and heals her child without even seeing her or touching her. The woman leaves Jesus to go home, fully trusting that her daughter has been healed, and she is indeed healed. The story progresses when Jesus leaves Tyre by way of Sidon towards the Sea of Galilee in the region of Decapolis, where the people bring him a deaf man with a speech impediment. This time, Jesus pulls the man aside, away from the crowds, to heal him by way of his touch and his word. He asks the people not to tell others about the miracle, knowing full well they will do just the opposite. So in today's gospel, we see how Jesus crosses geographic and racial lines to heal a Gentile girl and a disabled man. We don't know if this was Jesus' intent prior to arriving, or did he seize an opportunity that presented itself? He crosses gender lines when speaking to the Syrophoenician woman who spoke to Jesus first, a taboo action in those days. In the Epistle of James this week, he warns against classism, among other things. Today, we would add warnings also against discrimination based on race, gender, sexual orientation, ableism, that is, the discrimination against those with disabilities. In a 2007 Harvard School article, Dr. Monique Tello tells a true story about a poor African-American woman and her visit to the emergency room. She had a painful medical condition. The emergency room staff not only failed to treat her pain, but treated her like she was lying for the purpose of receiving pain medication. They did not diagnose her or help her at all. They could not discharge her fast enough. She was forced to seek appropriate treatment at another hospital. From this experience, perhaps we can acknowledge the words of Martin Luther King Jr., who once stated, "People fail to get along because they fear each other. They fear each other because they don't know each other. They don't know each other because they don't communicate with each other." How do we apply the gospel message in the context of our lives today, the people of St. Paul Lutheran Church? Well, we are already doing many things. First of all, we are a welcoming church. Our welcome statement says it all. It's a very creative way of being welcoming to all people, regardless of age, gender, sexual orientation, race, ableism, and many other characteristics. We are active with the Salvation Army, which helps the homeless population and others in need. We're involved in social ministries that impact all people. We're involved in Breakthrough Project, which fights against racism and hate crimes in our town. As a parish, we're called to provide ministry to the 40% Latino population here in Lodi. To Today's gospel and epistle asks us to reflect also on our individual actions. Would we cringe if a homeless person walked into our church? How do we react if a person whose skin color is different than our own sits next to us in the pew or stands in line next to us in the grocery store? Does the sight of a turban make us uneasy? Do we lock our car door when driving through an intersection with a person of color or a homeless person standing on the corner? Sometimes we have to look deeply into our own souls to see if we have any of these feelings. If we do, what then? First, we need to admit that we have them. Second, we explore the reasons for our feelings. And lastly, we pray for God's loving guidance to accept all people as equal and as children of God. Today's good news is that we're all loved by God, regardless of our individual characteristics. God doesn't recognize white privilege, economic privilege, name privilege, or any other privilege. Robert F. Kennedy had all these privileges, but you would never have known it from the way he acted. Following the assassination of Martin Luther King, Jr., Kennedy spoke to a turbulent crowd, saying these words: "What we need in the United States is not division. What we need in the United States is not hatred. What we need in the United States is not violence and lawlessness, but is love and wisdom and compassion toward one another, and a feeling of justice towards those who suffer in our country." If we follow these great words and the example of Jesus, then we can recognize that everyone is privileged to receive God's love. And out of that great love from God, to pass that love along to all others. Amen.